My brother called me to his office with HR. His wife, Rachel, after 25 years, said, "Your role's redundant." His voice like ice. "Clear your office by noon." I nodded calmly and said, "Understood." They didn't know Friday would turn the tables. "We're so glad you're here with us today. Before we begin, we'd love to hear from you. Drop the name of your city in the comments below." All right, let's get into the story. I'm James Carter, 47, and for 25 years, I've been the backbone of Carter's Orchard Supply in Yakima, Washington. Adopted by the Carters at 6, I grew up among apple trees, turning a roadside stand into a regional name. That Tuesday, my adoptive brother David, now CEO, called me into his office. His wife Rachel, our HR head, sat there, arms crossed, her face a mask of indifference. "James, we're restructuring," David said, his voice flat as a frozen pond. "Your role's redundant. Clear your office by noon. No warning, no handshake. Just 25 years of my life snuffed out like a spent match. I'd hauled crates at dawn, balanced books through sleepless nights, grafted trees that still bear fruit today. All for this. I'd felt the shift for months, David's clipped orders over the phone, Rachel's sidelong glances when I passed her desk. I chalked it up to stress their big plans, to modernize the business I'd built with my hands. But this wasn't stress. It was a gut punch. "Understood," I said, nodding once, my throat tight. I turned and walked out, boots echoing on the hardwood floor. Henry Carter, my adoptive dad, had laid decades ago. The orchard wasn't just a job. It was my home, my proof I belonged. David and Rachel, though, they saw me as the hired hand who'd overstayed. Not blood, not family, just a loose end to cut. Back at my desk, I stared at the worn chair I'd sat in since I was 22, the photos of my wife Emily and our kids pinned to the corkboard. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. I started packing, my orchard ledger, a chipped mug from Emily, a small carving of an apple tree my son made in shop class. Across the room, the new hires I'd trained shuffled papers, avoiding my gaze. David's voice carried from his office, already on to the next call. My chest burned, but I kept my jaw set. They'd taken my work, my place. I wasn't blood to them, just dirt they could scrape off their boots. Driving home that Tuesday, the orchard's rows blurred past my truck window, each tree a silent witness to the life I'd sown into Carter's Orchard Supply. I wasn't born a Carter. Foster care bounced me around until Henry and Clara took me in at 6, their arms warm as the Yakima sun. They gave me a bedroom with a view of the apple blossoms, a chipped wooden chair at their kitchen table, and a purpose. By 22, I was up before dawn, pruning branches while David, their real son, slept off college hangovers. I didn't mind. The orchard was my proving ground. Every crate I stacked, every ledger I balanced said I belonged. When Henry handed me the keys to the packing shed, his calloused grip lingered, and Clara baked me a rhubarb pie to celebrate. That was family, wasn't it? I stayed through the years. David chased frat parties and Henry's knees gave out. By the time I was 30, we'd grown from a roadside stand to supplying half the grocers in central Washington. I'd sit with Henry on the porch swing, sipping his bitter black coffee, plotting how to outlast the big chains. "You've got roots here, James," he'd say, his voice gravelly but sure. I believed him. When Emily and I married, we raised our kids among those trees, teaching them to climb the gnarled trunks, laughing as juice stained their chins during harvest. I turned down offers from corporate outfits in Seattle, their slick promises no match for the smell of damp earth after a spring rain. Loyalty wasn't just a word. It was the ache in my shoulders after a long day, the pride in seeing our apples on neighbors' tables. Henry passed 5 years ago, his heart giving out under the weight of 70 winters. Clara followed soon after, leaving the business to David. I'd hoped he'd see me as Henry, had a partner, not a shadow. But David came back with an MBA and a gleam in his eye, talking streamlining and expansion like buzzwords could grow fruit. Rachel, his wife, joined him, her sharp heels clicking through the shed as she scribbled notes about efficiency. They'd huddle with new hires, kids half my age with laptops and no dirt under their nails, while I patched irrigation lines in the rain. I'd catch David's gaze, sliding past me in meetings, his jaw tight, like I was a relic he couldn't wait to shove. Rachel stopped asking my input on orders, her smile thinning to a line when I offered it anyway. I kept going, though. The orchard was more than a paycheck. It was the late nights I'd spent with Henry rigging tarps against frost. The mornings Clara slipped me extra bacon for keeping us afloat. I taught our drivers to charm buyers, negotiated deals that kept us in the black when droughts hit. Even after David took over, I'd linger in the shed, running my hands over the weathered sorting table Henry built, its edges smoothed by decades of use. I'd hear his chuckle in the creak of the floorboards, feel Clara's quiet faith in the way the light hit the bins. That's what I held on to when David started calling me the old-timer behind my back, when Rachel's emails about new protocols left me off the chain. Looking back, I see the shift creeping in like frost on a clear night. David's modernization wasn't about growth. It was about control. He'd lean on Rachel's ideas, fancy software, outsource crews while I'd argue for the hands-on ways that worked. We're not in the 70s anymore, James. He'd snap, his tone slicing deeper each time. I'd nod, swallow the sting, and keep my head down, thinking I could outlast it like I'd outlasted lean seasons. But the chill settled in, fewer nods from the crew I'd trained, more whispers when I walked by. I'd catch myself gripping the steering wheel tighter on the drive home. Emily's gentle, "You okay?" met with a shrug and a sip of lukewarm tea from the thermos she'd packed me since '98. Now, with my office cleared out, those roots feel uprooted, the orchard's still there, its branches heavy with fruit I coaxed from saplings. But it's not mine anymore. David and Rachel didn't just take my job. They took the decades I poured into proving I was a Carter, not just the kid they'd taken in. I pull into our driveway. The house quiet, except for the hum of the fridge Emily's kept running since we moved in. I sit there, keys in hand, the weight of it all settling like dust on an old photo album. 25 years of belonging gone in a morning. The orchard office smelled of cedar and coffee as I packed the last of my things that Tuesday afternoon, the silence broken only by the hum of the old heater Henry installed back in '89. I was folding Emily's faded quilt, the one she draped over my chair during late-night inventory counts, when I heard Rachel's voice drift through the thin wall. "Mismanaged funds," she said, crisp and certain, briefing the crew I taught to load trucks and tally crates. It's why we had to let him go. My hands froze, the quilt slipping to the floor. I'd never touched a penny that wasn't earned. Every dollar I'd logged was for the orchard, not my pocket. The lie settled in my gut like a stone, heavier than David's dismissal. I peeked through the blinds. Young faces I'd coached nodded, eyes darting away from my corner. They believed her. These kids I'd handed thermoses of cocoa to on frosty mornings now swallowing a story that painted me a thief. I drove home with the radio off, the quiet amplifying the ache. Emily was at her book club, so I let myself into our house. The familiar creak of the screen door, a small comfort. On the kitchen table sat a letter from David, postmarked a week ago, but unopened. Odd, since he'd never mailed me anything before. I slit it with my pocket knife, the one Henry gave me when I turned 18, and read. He'd sold the West Orchard plot, 40 acres I'd nursed through blight and drought, to a developer for condos. No discussion, no heads up, just a done deal. The cash reinvested into the business. That land wasn't just profit. It was where I'd planted my first Granny Smiths, where I'd taught my daughter Sophie to spot ripe fruit by its blush. I'd spent summers there with Henry, sweat, soaked and grinning, dreaming of a legacy. Now it'd be asphalt and rooftops. My work erased for David's bottom line. I sank into the recliner. Henry left us, its worn leather still holding the shape of his broad shoulders. The sting wasn't just the firing anymore. It was the way they were rewriting me out of the story. Rachel's slander cut deep, turning years of trust into a whisper campaign. I could still see her at family dinners, passing me mashed potatoes with a smile, back when I thought we were kin. David's land sale was a quieter wound but sharper. Like losing a piece of myself I'd tended with calloused hands. I'd always been the steady one, the one who fixed leaks and soothed suppliers while David chased quick fixes. Now he was cashing out my past, and Rachel was burying my name in mud. Outside, the wind rustled the maple we'd planted when our son Jack was born, its leaves turning gold, a reminder of time I couldn't claw back. I thought of the crew, their averted gazes replaying in my mind. I'd been their anchor, showing them how to brace trees against storms, sharing sandwiches Emily packed when we worked late. To hear I'd betrayed them hurt more than David's cold redundant. I pulled the quilt over my lap, tracing its stitches. Each one, a memory of Emily's quiet support. She'd believed in me when I doubted I'd fit with the Carters. Her voice soft over cups of chamomile tea. You're their heart. James was I. Or had I been fooling myself, grafting onto a family that had always seen me as borrowed? The phone rang, Emily checking in. You sound off, she said, her worry threading through the line. Just tired. I lied, not ready to spill the mess. I hung up and stared at the letter. David's signature, bold and careless. Rage flickered, but it wasn't loud. It was a slow burn, like embers under ash. They hadn't just taken my job. They'd taken the trust I'd built, brick by brick, with people I'd called mine. Rachel's words would spread neighbors at the feed store, folks at church, and the West Plot sale would leave a scar on the land I'd loved. I folded the letter, tucking it into Henry's old cigar box, on the mantel next to Clara's faded recipe cards. This wasn't over. I'd given them 25 years of my soul, and they'd turned it to dust. But dust settles, and I'd find a way to rise from it, quietly, like always. Wednesday morning. I woke to the quiet, no alarm buzzing, no truck engine rumbling to life. Emily had left for her shift at the library, leaving a plate of oatmeal cookies on the counter, their cinnamon warmth a silent hug. I carried my coffee black, the way Henry liked it, to the attic, where I'd stashed boxes of Orchard records years ago. David never cared for paper trails. He'd mocked my habit of keeping carbons, calling it old school. Now those faded sheets felt like lifelines. I hauled a crate to the floor, its weight tugging at my back, and started sifting through invoices and ledgers, the dust tickling my nose like harvest pollen. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, just a thread to pull, something to make sense of the wreckage. An hour in, I found it. Payments to Green Valley Consulting, starting 3 years back, tucked into supply orders. I'd never questioned. The totals climbed $15.0 here, $80.0 there, adding up to $2.1 million over time. I'd assumed it was for equipment or soil testing, but the address was a PO box, and a quick search on Emily's old laptop showed it tied to Rachel's cousin Mark, a guy I'd met once at a barbecue, all grins and greasy ribs. My breath caught. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. It was a siphon, bleeding the orchard dry while I'd been out pruning branches. I leaned against the attic wall, the cold wood pressing into my shoulder, and let that sink in. They'd built a scheme under my nose, banking on my trust. Then came the second blow. Flipping through a stack of carbons, I spotted my signature, or what looked like it on approvals for Green Valley's invoices. The loops were off, the slant too sharp. It was forged, clumsy but close enough to fool a rushed auditor. My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading like frost over glass. David hadn't just cut me loose. He'd set me up as the fall guy, a scapegoat if the books ever cracked open. I pictured him at his desk, pen in hand, smirking as he traced my name. 25 years of loyalty, twisted into a noose. The attic felt smaller, the air thick with betrayal's bitter tang. I carried the papers downstairs, spreading them on the dining table where Emily and I had hosted Thanksgivings. The kids' crayon marks still faint on its edge. Each date and figure stared back, a map of their greed. I remembered Mark at that barbecue, clapping David on the back, Rachel pouring lemonade like nothing was brewing. They'd played family while pocketing cash I'd sweated to earn cash that could have fixed the tractor. Henry left me, or sent Sophie to college without loans. Instead, it was gone, and my name was their shield. I rubbed my eyes, the sting of dust and something deeper blurring the room. Outside, the wind chimes Clara hung years ago tinkled faintly, a sound that used to mean peace. Now it mocked me, a reminder of what I'd lost. Not just a job, but the roots I thought were mine. I'd spent decades proving I was a Carter, staying late to mend fences, sharing coffee with drivers at dawn. David and Rachel hadn't just exploited that. They'd turned it against me, betting I'd stay quiet. The adopted son, too grateful to fight. My fingers traced the forged signature, the paper crinkling under my touch. I'd taught Jack to sign his name here, proud block letters for his first bank account. Now mine was a lie, in someone else's hand. Emily's cookie plate sat nearby, a lifeline to the ordinary. I took one, its sweetness grounding me as the fury settled, not a roar, but a slow, steady pulse. They'd fired me to bury this, thinking I'd fade into the background like an old barn left to rot. But I'd kept those records for a reason. Henry's voice in my ear, always know your numbers. James. I pulled the cigar box from the mantel, sliding the evidence inside next to Clara's recipe for apple crisp. Its edges yellowed but sure. The attic had given me more than proof. It had given me a choice. I stepped onto the porch. The late morning sun warming the boards Henry and I had sanded one July. Down the road, the orchard stretched, its trees still standing because of me, my grafts, my care. David and Rachel thought they'd won, that I'd slink off with my tail tucked. They didn't know I'd seen every season, through floods, freezes, beetle swarms. This was bigger, uglier, but I'd faced worse with less. I sipped my coffee, the mug's chipped rim familiar against my lip, and felt something shift, not anger, exactly, but a quiet resolve. Like the first green shoot, after a long winter, they'd taken my place, my name, my land, but I had the truth, and I'd use it softly, deliberately, the way I'd always worked. Wednesday afternoon. I sat at the kitchen table, the orchard records spread out like a quilt of betrayal, their numbers whispering secrets David and Rachel thought they'd buried. Emily's wind-up clock ticked above the sink, marking time I'd never spent idle before. I couldn't storm back with fists or shouts that wasn't me. Instead, I opened my old laptop, the one Sophie used for college essays, and logged into an email account I'd set up years ago for supplier backups. It still had orchard credentials, a thread they'd forgotten to snip. I typed a message to David, noticed irregularities with Green Valley Consulting payments. We should review. Short, vague, just enough to rattle him. I hit send at 2:17 p.m., then leaned back, the chair creaking like Henry's old rocker, waiting for the ripples. By 2:45, my phone buzzed David's number. I let it ring, picturing him pacing his office, the one with the big window overlooking my west plot. Now sold. His voicemail was clipped. James, call me now. At 3:10, Rachel emailed from HR. Cease all contact with Carter's orchard staff. This violates confidentiality. Her words were a jab, but I saw the tremor behind them. They were scrambling. I sipped tea from the mug Emily painted with daisies for our 20th anniversary, its warmth steadying me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about pulling the weeds they'd let choke what I'd built. I needed leverage, someone they couldn't ignore. George Miller came to mind, Henry's fishing buddy, and a silent partner with a 20% stake. He'd retired to a cabin by the river but still showed up for meetings, his flannel shirts a quiet rebellion against David's suits. I drove out Thursday morning, the orchard scent fading. As I wound past golden fields, George met me on his porch, a thermos of coffee in hand, steam curling into the crisp air. "Heard you got the boot," he said, squinting. I handed him a folder, Green Valley's payments, Mark's name, my forged signature. His jaw tightened as he read. "The thermos forgotten. Henry would have skinned him," he muttered. "I'll be at Friday's partner meeting. This ends there." Back home, the mailbox held another blow, a note from the co-op. A driver I'd trained said David was telling folks I'd stolen equipment. Claiming it explained my firing. My truck's toolbox, the one I'd stocked with wrenches Henry passed down, flashed in my mind. I'd left it spotless, not a bolt missing. The lie stung, a fresh bruise on an old wound, turning neighbors I'd swapped stories with at the diner into doubters. I set the note beside Emily's cookie jar, its chipped lid, a relic from her mum's kitchen, and felt the ache, sharp and not loud, but deep, like a root-cracking stone. They weren't just erasing me. They were poisoning the ground I'd tilled. Emily came home, her library badge glinting under the porch light. "You're quiet," she said, setting her purse by the door. I showed her the co-op note, the forged invoices. Her eyes softened, then flared. "After all you gave them," she whispered, squeezing my hand. We sat on the couch, her head against my shoulder, the same spot we'd watched Johnny Carson reruns when the kids were small. "What's next?" she asked. I told her about George, the email. "Friday," I said. She nodded, her faith a lifeline. I scheduled a mass email to all partners. George included set for 8 a.m. tomorrow, attaching every damning page. It had hit as they sipped their coffee. David smug in his chair. Thursday night. I walked the backyard, the grass damp under my boots. The apple tree Jack and I planted for his 10th birthday stood tall, its fruit tart but honest. I taught him to prune it, just as Henry taught me steady cuts, no rush. David and Rachel thought speed won, that I'd fold under their lies. But I'd weathered storms, they'd never faced blizzards that snapped branches, summers that parched the soil. This was my harvest now, not of apples, but of truth. I went inside, locked the laptop in Henry's cigar box, and slept better than I had since Tuesday, the weight shifting from burden to purpose. Friday dawned grey, the sky heavy with promise. I drove to the orchard's edge, parking across from the shed where I'd spent my mornings. Workers streamed in, their coats zipped against the chill, unaware of the storm I'd loosed. At 8:00 sharp, my email landed. Subject, urgent financial review. I imagined David's face, Rachel's clipped stride faltering. My phone stayed silent, but I knew the gears were turning. The orchard stretched before me, its rows a testament to years I'd given years they tried to steal. I gripped the steering wheel, Henry's pocket knife in my pocket, a quiet companion. Hurt had fueled me. But now, it was something else, a calm, clear resolve, like the first light after a long frost. They'd taken my place, my name, my trust. I'd take it back, not with noise, but with the steady hand that had always guided me. Friday morning, I sat on our porch with a mug of coffee, the steam curling up like the mist over the orchard at dawn. At 8:00, my email hit the partners' inboxes, and by 9:15, George texted, David sweating, Rachel's quiet, sheriff's here. I pictured the chaos, David stammering in his office, Rachel clutching her clipboard, the shed humming with whispers. George, said David, confessed to skimming through Green Valley, blaming Rachel's cousin Mark. Rachel swore she only followed orders. The $2, $1 million they'd siphoned unraveled like a dropped stitch, and the partners, farmers and old-timers who trusted me with their harvests called by 10:00 voices tight. Come back, James. Full control. We'll clear your name. I set terms, financial oversight, a public retraction of their lies. By noon, they agreed. The orchard mine again, in name and deed. Months later, I stood in the shed, the air thick with apple dust, watching crates roll out under my watch. David stood charges, his plea deal crumbling. Rachel fought hers, claiming ignorance, but the evidence, my evidence, held firm. The West plot was lost, but the rest thrived, its roots deep because of me. Emily brought me lunch one day, her thermos of soup warm against my hands, and smiled. Feels right, does not it? I nodded. The ache of betrayal faded, not gone, but softened, like a scar under new skin. Satisfaction settled in, not joy. Justice had bloomed, quiet and sure, from the dirt they tried to bury me in. The crew nodded as I passed, their respect a silent harvest of trust replanted. I kept Henry's pocket knife on me, its weight a reminder of the steady cuts that saved what mattered. One evening, I sat with Emily by the backyard apple tree, its branches heavy with fruit Jack once climbed. She asked, was it worth it? I thought of the years I'd given, the lies I'd undone. Had to be done, I said, my voice low. She squeezed my hand, her wedding band cool against my skin, and we watched the sun dip, painting the sky gold. That fight taught me something enduring. Trust is a fragile root, thriving only where it's tended, not assumed. David and Rachel tore mine up, thinking I'd wither. But I found new soil, George's faith, the crew's nods, Emily's steady presence. It's not about blood or titles. It's about who stands with you when the wind howls. I could have burned it all down, walked away bitter, but I rebuilt instead, slowly, brick by brick, like Henry taught me to stack a fence. Some bridges collapse under greed's weight, others, mended with care, hold stronger than before. I chose the mending. And now, I walk the orchard knowing it's mine, not by birth, but by the hands that kept it alive. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. Family can be a place of love or the deepest kind of pain. If you've ever felt mistreated or taken for granted by those closest to you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. You never know who else might need to hear your story.